Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are, whatever your time zone. Welcome. This is Digital Transformation Talk, and I'm your host, Kevin Crane. Welcome to the show. Today, we'll be discussing the topic of digital transformation from cost reduction to value creation. And this is important because for many organizations, digital transformation is primarily linked with cost savings and efficiency. And while these are undoubtedly important, equating cost cutting with value can limit the potential of your digital initiatives by narrowing its scope to short-term savings rather than long-term growth and innovation. When cost reduction drives strategies, companies often avoid investing in emerging technologies or customer-focused initiatives that if they don't really see immediate ROI. This approach not only curtails experimentation, but can lead to rigid systems that struggle to adapt to new market shifts. A focus on value creation, on the other hand, encourages strategic investments that enhance customer experiences, open up new revenue streams, and drive sustainable growth. So today we'll be exploring that in three areas to consider. Our first topic will delve into the limitations of viewing price as the primary measure and value for digital transformation and how this can narrow our perspective and lead us astray. And then we'll look at the risk of focusing too heavily on cost reduction, how it can stifle innovation and discourage experimentation and prevent organizations from discovering breakthrough opportunities that really drive growth and differentiation. And finally, we'll refine what value creation really means in today's digital economy. We'll discuss actionable strategies for prioritizing value creation in ways that enhance our customer experiences and foster resilience and lead to a sustainable competitive advantage. So it should be another really great informative session today. But listen, before I introduce our guest today, I want to say that we want to thank everyone attending today, and that includes folks that are joining us live on LinkedIn. Thank you, as well as the folks here on Zoom. Join us on Zoom for the full experience. It should be a great discussion today, but I want to hear from you too. I'd like to encourage everyone attending today to participate, so please join in with your comments in the chat section. And if you have a question along the way, please jump on in. I will attempt to get some of your questions into the flow of the show today, and we'll have a few minutes also at the end for your questions. All right, well, we have a ton to cover, so let's get into it. Let's introduce our great panel of guests today, starting with Yemi Alusian, Program Director and Business Transformation Strategist at the Change Hive. Yemi, are you with us? Hello,
Yes, hi.
Yemi.
Hi there.
Ah,
Hi, Kevin.
there you are.
Yeah.
Welcome
I'm
aboard, Yemi.
struggling with
Where are
my
you
camera
calling in from today?
from London.
Welcome aboard from London. All right, Yemi Alusian is with us today. Also joining us today is Phil Tomlinson, Senior Vice President of Global Offerings at TaskUs. Hello, Phil. Welcome to the show. Where are you calling in from today?
Hey, Kevin, I'm delighted to be here. I am joining from a cold Dublin, Ireland.
Dublin, Ireland. Ah, okay. I have friends in Ireland, and indeed, I've seen some of the weather there that you guys are forecast to be experiencing.
Yeah,
So,
first snow
welcome
of the
aboard.
season coming up this week.
All right. Yes, yes. Okay. Well, indeed. Well, stay safe and stay warm.
Thank
Thank
you.
you for being with us. And also joining us today is Mike Tedasco, ex-Senior Director of Innovation at PayPal. Mike, welcome aboard. Where are you calling in from today?
I'm in a garage in Silicon Valley right now, Kevin, and
Oh,
excited.
okay. All right. I hope you're inventing the new best thing in a garage and in the
Try
Bay
to.
Area today. All right. Well, everyone, welcome aboard. Thank you so much for joining us today. To start us out, I'd like to direct our attention to an article published recently by Financial Management called Value Creation, CFOs Positioned to Lead in Digital Transformation. And the article is based on some research from IBM that explores how CFOs can lead digital transformation success, detailing some strategies for integrating technology with business strategy. The IBM report highlights a number of areas where CFOs are uniquely positioned to drive digital transformation, integrating technology early into the strategy, focusing on long-term value creation, and investing in talent and AI capabilities among them. It warns that CFOs must or should shift from viewing technology as a problem-solving tool into leveraging it for innovation and opportunity creation. There's a lot to consider, but I found some statistics in the article worth mentioning really quickly. 35% of finance organizations engage, only 35% of financial organizations engage tech leaders early. Top performing CFOs representing 9% of the IBM data set. The top performing ones align tech investments with measurable business outcomes, and as a result, often outperform their peers. And developing leadership and workforce skills was found to be critical, as 40% of financial roles will evolve significantly in next year, 2025. I'm curious from the panel what your thoughts are on the article. Did the article miss anything important? And where do you think CFOs are positioned, especially, I guess, in financial services, to lead the digital transformation? Phil, I'd like to start with you.
Yeah.
What were your thoughts on the article?
Yeah, thanks, Kevin. Yeah, really insightful. It's interesting when I think of financial institutions, we tend to think of, legacy banks and the sort of Wall Street giants and or the London sort of banking giants. But, there's a lot of really innovative companies in that mix as well, all the new fintechs and neobanks and crypto companies. And there's this really interesting sort of innovation curve happening in that space. I know the article is probably talking about the latter group, right? It's sort of more traditional financial institutions who are trying to transform. Maybe they're on legacy systems, maybe they're on some hardware, they want to move to the cloud. Maybe they're trying to introduce new technologies like generative AI within their organization, or maybe even facing their own customers in a B2C or a B2B way. So I have the kind of privilege and luxury in my role at Taskus of kind of dealing with some of those folks as part of our customer set. Although to be frank, most of our customers sit in the kind of more neobank fintech side. We do have a few traditional players as well. I think the first thing I'd say is the analogy I always like to think of is when I'm thinking about cost versus value, and I think about my own life. I never buy the cheapest tires for my car, I never buy the cheapest shoes for my feet, and I never buy the cheapest mattress to sleep on. When you think about your business, where the rubber meets the road, so to speak, I think is anything that touches your customers. When there is a process, a piece of technology, a team that are directly interfacing with your customers and driving customer experience, that's where you need to think about the value versus just cheaper is better, right? So I think that's the point I'd like to make. If something is touching your customers, if something impacts their experience of your business, your product, your offering, that is where you need to really look at what the trade-offs are about, cheap versus quality.
All right, very good. Now, Yemi, what are your impressions about this article? Do you agree that CFOs are in a unique position to drive success with digital transformation today?
Yeah, absolutely, Kevin. I like the stats you pulled out. I think they were very fascinating. I agree with you. The stats are fascinating. So it's interesting to see that most CFOs are seeing the need to involve the CTOs or their CTO counterparts, and they see them as part of their holistic success in their role. So it's good to see that. I suppose we're now starting to see technology not as an afterthought, but as a part of the core strategy for growth across all the entire organization. So that was quite good to see. But I think there's work to be done, maybe from us as technologists, really, because it says only 35% of finance organizations are engaged when IT starts planning new initiatives. And I think that's something that we need to address as well, because I think traditionally, and this is where the disconnect I see happens, because most CFOs think in terms of give me the business case, give me the ROI for implementing XYZ stuff. But as the article rightly points out, we need to make a shift from seeing technology as a problem solver or as a reactive tool to more of a proactive tool, right? So talk about how AI can be used for predictive analysis and creating new business opportunities, or even things like cybersecurity. So implementing cybersecurity tools. Those kind of initiatives don't immediately have ROI per se, but we all know from experience and from news headlines of when it goes wrong, the impact it has on customers, the impact it has on the brand reputation, and how long it takes to bounce back as well. So it's good. I like the article. I like the point it hits on. I think the general message is we need to start to make a shift in how we put forward business cases for change and for digital transformation, and seeing it more as a how does it position us strategically, and to Phil's point, thinking about it holistically. So what customer impact is it going to have? So let's move away from seeing things siloed as just finance, just IT, just HR. It's like, no, holistically, how does it make us better as an organization overall? So I thought it was a great article.
Okay. Now, Mike, what are your thoughts on the article? Did it miss anything important that we should be considering?
Well, the one stat that stood out to me was the 40% of finance roles will be either new or significantly reshaped due to new finance technology. And look, I think if anything, that's probably an understatement of where we're going and what's going to be happening with this. I always like to look back to historical parallels. And I started my career in finance and accounting. And if you look to the finance and accounting world specifically, go back to the time of the introduction of Lotus 123, the spreadsheets, and think about what a massive change that was to the function and what the function looked like before that versus what the function looked like after that. It completely changed what they did. It completely changed the value that they had, and people's jobs changed. People's were able to upskill, up level as part of that. Looking at finance now and where finance can be 6 months, 12 months, 18 months from now, as far as upskilling, the new technologies that are being introduced will completely revolutionize the finance role, as many other parts of the organization. And to be, and I would say just all CFOs out there, be at the forefront of this. Do you want your competitors doing this first? Or do you want to be at the forefront? Put to forth teams to start to look at like, hey, how do we actually upskill? How do we become more strategic? How do we become, do we still have people just doing debits and credits around here? Like these are all things that can and should and will be automated. Automate those things and upskill for the rest of the organization so that you can be more strategic and a bigger part of just driving better business decisions, which is what every finance organization should aspire to.
All right. Well, the article is from Financial Management Value Creation CFOs Positioned to Lead in Digital Transformation. There is a link here in the chat feature. We'd like to invite everyone to go take a look. Let us know what you think about the article. Give us a comment or a question in the chat feature and let us know what you think about the article. All right. Well, very good. Let's move into the body of our discussion today, and that is really starting with the discussion about the limitations of equating price with value in digital transformation. And this is indeed a tempting thing for most organizations. We're all looking to save money. But Phil, in your experience, what are some of the common risks companies face when they focus on a cost as a primary metric in their digital transformation strategy?
Yeah, it's such a good question. And again, I'll sort of stick on the theme of customer facing elements. There's a trend out in the market now because generative AI has exploded like a rocket across every single business in the world right now, and a lot of CFOs and CTOs, well, maybe not a lot, but certainly some are taking the approach of I have to deploy this stuff, otherwise I'm going to be left behind, right? My neighbor has, my friend has, my competitor has, I better do it too. And I think the short-term view that some folks are taking will be, well, I can just automate all of my customer service. Wow, that'll save me $1 million or $5 million or $10 million a year. So I'm just going to go do that. The risk to your question is, I think it's pretty clear that not having humans at some part in the process, whether that is maybe doing escalations, complex queries, quality control, ongoing fine-tuning of the models that are deployed against your customer base, or some other kinds of improvement work related to that experience, that you're going to fail, right? And these models have a tendency to hallucinate. They have a tendency to be limited by the data on which they are trained. They have a tendency to not be able to read the nuance in certain situations. And I'll give you an example, right? If you hire a car and you want to find out, hey, I want to know my billing history for the last 12 months. That's probably something that can and should be automated pretty easily, right? It's a simple task, it's a quick lookup, and it's a return of data. You don't need a human being to go and click 5 buttons to do that, right? But if your query is, hey, the car just broke down in the middle of nowhere, I'm here with my family and my 3 kids, I need someone to help me right now. You want to speak to a person, and you want that person to have some understanding and empathy, and also some ability and some agency to do something for you. And I think that's how companies should think about it, right? Like, what are those mission critical issues or query types that I know I want a human being to deal with, versus what's the low hanging fruit that I can automate and save myself some money, pass those savings back to the CFO, and be the hero in the board meeting. I think there's always going to have to be that balance between automating with care, attention, and thoughtfulness, but keeping humans as part of the quality control process so that the automation stays within the guardrails you've determined. And then there should be some lines beyond which you don't cross when it comes to automating customer service flows. I think any of those relate to where there's a safety concern, where there's a significant customer churn or customer retention issue, or perhaps if there's a significant financial upside or downside associated with the concern. And to close, I'd say there's going to be some companies who just choose not to do that at all. They want, I mean, I know some of our clients at TaskUs, they've told us explicitly, I want every query to be dealt with by a human. That is our philosophy. That is the stand we're going to take. Now, maybe that'll evolve over time, and they're going to get pressures from their CFO and boards and others. But I think it's a spectrum of use cases, and certainly the risks are out there if you're not thinking through that carefully at the onset.
Now, when it comes to business transformation, I'm wondering how companies can approach this differently. How can companies better balance their need for ROI and cost management with initiatives that drive innovation and long-term value? Yemi, what are your suggestions for this approach to business transformation that balances cost and innovation?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I agree with Phil's point. So Phil was saying not to go for extremes. So making sure that we don't over automate, because there's a temptation to kind of say, hey, we need to save costs. There's this new thing called AI. Let's make everything automated and kill the human interaction because, hey, we save costs. But then I think the starting point to your question, Kevin, is going back to our values as an organization. What is the ethos of this organ? I think any kind of digital transformation has to start with the why, and the why really is hinged upon the values of the organization. So whatever changes you want to make in the organization, the starting point is how do we, who are we, and how is this technology going to help us amplify who we are and attract the kind of customers that we want to attract. So it's, first of all, the values, clarity on your why, the strategic direction that you hope the technology is going to take you towards. I think third, and importantly, is think about the total cost of ownership. Because I think, again, when you select the technology you then decide to go for, there's a temptation to kind of go for the cheapest vendor, right? Or the cheapest solution or the cheapest, But cheapest, it can be kind of a double-edged sword, right? Because cheapest can be cheap upfront cost, but then the back end cost could then pile on, like the upgrades and on and on. Or cheapest could also be not good quality. So it's really taking a step back and saying, so of all the options of technology that we're considering, first of all, which one aligns most to our values? Which one has the best total cost of ownership? Which of the vendors do we trust to actually be a partner with us long term? Because whichever vendor or software provider you choose to go with, it's going to be a long-term relationship. This is not a 2-month project, right? It's going to be potentially a 5-year long project plus support and maintenance and ongoing relationship. But I think finally the fourth thing to consider as well as we think about cost is it possible to pilot or to test some of these solutions in a small scale way first in a part of the organization and see how well it works. And then if it works, then scale it across. So I think those are the 4 things I'll look to consider, right? Is what are our values? What is our why? What's the total cost of ownership? And can we pilot this solution before we then scale it up?
Okay. And Kevin, can I build on Yemi's point there? Like, I think that you're nailing it right there. Like, I think so often it's looked at from a binary perspective. It's either like our CEO saying we need to do AI, digital transformation, we need to do that, and we're going to just throw everything at it. Or, oh my gosh, we don't know what to do. The landscape is changing so much, so we don't do anything. And like those are the 2 binary extremes. Like me coming from like an innovation background, see it completely as, well, this is just a series of experiments. You need to try things in pockets. You need to test, you need to iterate, you need to see what actually works, and then you need to scale up. Like Bill was saying, you don't just wipe out customer service or whatever. You take something that seems highly automatable, and then you do that with a human in the loop as part of the process to see, well, then can we repurpose customer service agents to more value-added pieces, and then work through that process. Like, I think often we get stuck in choices, and I think leaders of organizations do this as well. And I think in the world of AI, it's changing so fast that, I just woke up this morning and Mistral, a French open source company, dropped a brand new model that looks amazing for all these other reasons. And if you have the old one or whatever, you're probably like, oh, geez, we did all that work to integrate that and so forth. Like, why did we even bother? Well, no, I mean, you need to kind of look at where the landscape is and just find out ways to
Yeah.
do experiments, just like what Yemi is saying there.
Now, I'm thinking as we're talking that perhaps one of the reasons why there is an overfocus or potential overfocus on cost management versus value is that cost is something we can measure. And I'm a believer if you can't measure it, you can't manage it, right? And so cost is easy to measure. We save money or we don't save money. There's a number there, it's countable. So I'll put this out to the group as a whole here for a moment. How can an organization measure the success of a value-driven digital transformation initiative beyond looking at financial metrics? How can we measure that? Anyone?
Yeah, I'll take a stab at it. I think we need to be looking at um, and going back to something that Yemi said, like, what is our North Star? What do we care about as a business? Is customer satisfaction the thing that we're going to align to above all else? Is profitability going to be the thing we align to? Is, efficiency gain going to be the thing? So, what do we care about? And then instrument against that, right? And again, because I'm kind of the customer guy, I'll talk about the customer or the CSAT metric, right? If I'm overhauling, changing, transforming processes or introducing technology into all the processes in order to create efficiencies, to narrow the supply chain, to automate certain things that previously we had humans doing. I need to be looking at the cause and effect on the things I care about, right? And is my CSAT at least staying the same or going up? Are my customers telling me, are they giving me haptic feedback, so to speak, in real time, saying, hey, this is great? Or are they telling you something that's actually counterintuitive to what you thought at the start, which is, I don't mind taking an extra minute with your agent if I get the better outcome. And sometimes that's what they want, right? And you've got to both Mike and Yemi's point, test and iterate, test and iterate. Don't just roll something out en masse, because then the cost to like roll it back from 100 to 0% is a lot greater than rolling it back from 5% to 0%. So just keep running those A and B tests. Keep aligning your outcomes to the metrics you care about, whether that's CSAT or something else, and be prepared to be wrong, but also be
Right.
prepared to double down when you're right.
All right. Well, let's put it out to the audience here that are with us today. How can you give us an example of in your situation, folks, that where focusing on price instead of value has limited your organization's potential? What happened for you? What did you do? And what are your suggestions for how organizations can actually measure the value of digital transformation? I'd be interested to hear what our audience has to say on that. But for now, let's move on to our next discussion point today. And it's really related, continuing on, how a singular focus on cost reduction actually can hinder innovation. Yemi, what are some specific ways that cost reduction goals can prevent teams from pursuing innovative ideas?
Yeah, I think we saw the article allude to this point as well, right? Is before, I don't know, I think 20 years ago, technology was very reactive, was the thing you just kind of had to do. Most tech teams were in the basement somewhere and they were an afterthought. Um, but these days, and this is part of why the mentality or the mindset of I want to see the ROI. So every time you have a change you want to deploy, I want to see the ROI and the benefit upfront. But if we reverse that and at least allocate some of the budget towards innovation and towards experimentation, the kind of things we can start to see is some predictive analysis happen. So if you look at the finance example, for example, you can start to look at all the expenses and analyze, say, the trends of spends and see, okay, so what are the trends we're seeing? Is there room for optimization? What can we predict? So we now have the report for this year end. What can we predict is going to happen in 2 years, 3 years from now? And based on that prediction, how can we get ahead of things to hopefully then drive some cost reductions in other areas of the organization? So by now investing in technology that can predict patterns, like AI predictive models, you miss that opportunity to see or to plan ahead and take advantage of potential cost saving opportunities in other areas of the organization to optimize it essentially. The other thing is you also miss the opportunities to prevent potential risks happening, right? As we talked about with cybersecurity. I think my cybersecurity guys are the ones that struggle the most really to make a case for why it's worth investing, because for a long time it does nothing. It's like it's there, but nothing is happening. It's like I spent all this money on this security device. Why is it not bringing any value to me? But it's not valuable until it's valuable. And I think it's making a case for that. So I think for me, just to summarize, the point is we need to shift. And to your point about what metrics can we use to measure it, it can be things like the lifetime. But I think it goes back to knowing what is the strategic focus of what are the OKRs. So as an organization, what is because I think part of the problem, this business case silo thing comes because each team is trying to do their own little initiative. But it's like, let's take a step back as an organization overall. What are our goals for 2025? What do we want to see happen? And based on that, how can technology help us hit those targets? I think is a better conversation to have than oh, finance wants this, IT wants this, HR wants this. It's not holistic. So you don't really know what the knock-on impact is, and then you then end up having unintended consequences as a result of being so siloed in our thinking. So I think it goes back to the same point, right? Is the way you can avoid singular focus is by really taking a step back to map out what are the objectives, what are the OKRs, and really being clear on the customer journey, because ultimately we're all in business to satisfy the customer at the starting point. So baseline, what's the customer journey, and any cut you're making, how is it going to impact customer as a starting point? And then everything else is a follow-on conversation.
Now, Mike Yemi brings up an interesting point. She made a comment, how can we use technology to help us with our technology? And as an ex-senior director of innovation at PayPal, I'm wondering what you feel the role of data and analytics play in identifying value creation opportunities versus merely finding cost-cutting options.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think Phil had brought up, the data and using that to drive the customer experience should be like number one. It's first and paramount in like everything that you're doing and you're pulling in there. Cost reductions, they will come with time. You will find efficiencies, you will be able to do that, and you will be able to use these tools to do that. But like first and foremost, like, unless you're in a death spiral for your company or something, and you absolutely need to cut costs to make payroll next month or something like that, you should be focusing on your customer. And look, I'm not saying that to be dismissive. Some companies are in that situation, but for the most part, it should be on the customer focus. You need to be focusing on growth and seeing where you can go as a company. I also wanted to comment a little bit on innovation, if I could. There's a concept called Jugaad innovation. It's an Indian term, and it effectively means innovation through less, basically through scarce resources. Not having much stuff available to you is when you innovate the most. And look, unless you're like Waymo or SpaceX or maybe OpenAI, like even in a company like PayPal, our innovation team was tiny. It was tiny. And I think, but innovation was something we permeated through our culture. But the concept of innovation itself should not be expensive. Like there's a lot that's, to use an Amazon concept of like, a team that pizza boxes can do a lot of things. And I think that often we just try and throw money to solve and say we're doing innovation and that's represented by money. But in reality, I think in many ways, innovation actually comes from constraints, comes from saying like, hey, you got 3 people, figure this thing out, and locking them in a room for X amount of time and just being able to work through a problem and seeing a better customer experience at the end. The amazing time we're living in right now is you literally have the world's most powerful machine learning and artificial intelligence models available to anyone at any company for like $20 a month. Like if you would have told me that 5 years ago, I would have thought that's absolutely absurd. So like you can do a lot with a little, and that's where I think innovation always needs to start.
Yeah.
All right, we are here today with Mike Tedasco, ex-Senior Director of Innovation at PayPal, also Yemi Alusian, Program Director and Business Transformation Strategist at the Change Hive, and Phil Tomlinson, Senior Vice President, Global Offerings at TaskUs. If you have a question or a comment for our group today, please enter them into the chat feature and we'll try to get them into the discussion, and we'll have a few minutes also. at the end for your questions. And indeed, Phil, we have a question coming in or a comment from Rebecca. Rebecca, thank you for your contribution today. Rebecca says, if we only focus on cost reduction, won't we end up hurting our ability to come up with new ideas and grow our business in the long run? How can we find a balance between cost reduction and investing in the future? Phil, what do you have to say for Rebecca?
Yeah, thanks, Rebecca, for the question. And I actually think Mike's done a great job pre-answering that question. If you are solely and exclusively focused on cost reduction, and that's the metric by which you're holding everyone accountable to, watch out. You're probably not in a good spot as a business, right? You're in launch the lifeboats mode, and that's okay. But I think there's always going to be a good balance and healthy tension between, okay, well, we want to innovate. We have to obviously manage our business to budget, and we have to, if you're a public company, you have to give them your quarterly and your annual projections, and you have to kind of land on the mark, otherwise the market punishes you, and you need a lot of data and analytics, and you need a lot of intelligence about your business in order to do that. But you also need to be, cognizant of cost. So absolutely, I think the best businesses are operating in a, I would say, in a meticulous and forward-looking way when it comes to their cost management, but they are also making, I would say, calculated bets on the future, right? And I think as a business, you need to have 2 or 3 things that you think these are the big needle movers for us in the next 18 to 24 months. We are going to make outsized investments in areas 1, 2, and 3. We're going to map those investments against milestones and outcomes that we think are important. We're going to track ourselves over time and hold ourselves accountable through an OKR framework or whatever you use in your company. And we're going to be prepared to take a left or a right turn if things aren't going right. Or, as I said earlier, if you see that one of those big bets, and generally, you only need one of those big bets to pay off for it to all pay for itself, right? So I think, as a leadership team for a company, you need to be sitting down and having those conversations and say, okay, we now have our cost management protocol in place, and we're going to expect all of our teams to manage to budget in order to achieve that. But we also have these areas that we think are going to be, outsized drivers of growth or outsized drivers of innovation for us over the next few, I would say probably, 18 to 24 months horizon, maybe a little longer. Anything beyond that, you're into crystal ball gazing, and I don't like it. But that's what we do at TaskUs. That's what we see our clients do, and I think the best businesses that I've ever had the privilege of being a part of have operated in that way.
All right, very good. Well, thank you, Rebecca, and keep them coming if you have questions or comments for our group today.
Yeah, I
And
think
Phil, you're
also
really
Kevin,
leading us
add to
into
that.
our next discussion point, and that is really redefining the value, redefining what value creation really means to us and how do we get there. And so my question is, how do we get there? What should we be doing differently? And Yemi, what do you feel are some mindsets or cultural changes that are necessary within an organization to prioritize value creation over cost cutting in digital transformation?
Sure. Great. I think Rebecca's question, I think she saw your notes because it really feeds in really well. I think we shouldn't say as either or, so cost cutting or innovation. I think it can be both, because if anything, by taking advantage of opportunities for automation to take out like all the repetitive, redundant work, all the repetitive tasks, you free up some headcount capacity to then work on innovation to the point that was made earlier, right? Is you can then have a few people that were probably before working, say, 8-hour days doing repetitive tasks. Now you freed up 4 hours of their day. Now those guys can be redeployed to think about creative ways to do innovative stuff in the organization. So it doesn't have to be brand new budget per se. I think we should be creative with how we do stuff. And I don't think this is an optional exercise. I think as any business operating in this day and age has to stay on top of things and innovate because technology is moving so quickly. You can't choose to opt out, unfortunately. Like it's all happening so quickly. We all need to opt in and stay on top of it. We've seen like some retailers go out of business because they opted out of trying to do online. So you have Bed Bath and Beyond in the US, for example, not investing in online sales and they lost and they basically fell bankruptcy because they couldn't keep up. We've had a few other retailers as well in a similar situation where they tried to cost cut by not investing in technology and it backfired in bankruptcy. So I think the premises we've talked about all stand. The key points are before you start any innovation or any cost-cutting exercise, take a step back to understand, first of all, what is your value proposition as an organization? Are you a cost player? Are you a service player? What exactly is your differentiation in the marketplace? Secondly, what is your customer journey from start to finish? What's your ideal customer journey as is? And what would you like it to be? I think by just doing that mapping exercise, you will start to see opportunities for automation and where you can tweak things and tighten things here and there, and you can free up some additional dollars or headcount. And with that freed up headcount, we can then look to deploy that into some innovation, or ideally have some budget dedicated standalone to us innovative and experimental projects. I think it's very great that we're having this conversation now because we're in budget season for most people, right? So they're thinking budgets right now. So it's actually good timing, I think,
Right.
for conversation. So I think those would be my three things, right? Is start with the values. What is your value? Map out your customer journey. That would automatically start to show you room for optimization and automation. Automate as much as possible, free up some bandwidth, and then look to deploy that bandwidth to us
Nice.
thinking creatively for the future.
Nice. And Mike, what are your recommendations for organizations? What should we be doing differently? What steps can companies take to shift their mindset from cost reduction to value creation?
I think the one thing to keep in mind is so hopefully everyone knows to have a good idea, you need to have lots of ideas. And similarly, to have like a breakthrough innovation, you need to have a lot of failures. So the first thing I would just tell people, especially who are looking at things organizationally, you are going to have things fail as part of the process to get to whatever innovations that it is that you want. And I think this earlier as well. So then organizationally, you need to have some sort of gating criteria, some sort of process, some sort of things that you can have within the organization. As Yemi mentioned, like, okay, if you're allocating X amount of budget to these type of activities, what is the way that you can have a whole lot of ideas at, stage 0, less at stage 1, more at stage 2, and so on and so forth to kind of move through a traditional innovation type cycle that you can have. And so I think it comes down to for me, like it doesn't take a lot of money to do this. And I think that is really one fallacy within the world of innovation. Like most great innovation is largely comes from constraints. I even mentioned OpenAI earlier. And I was reading something about one of the top models that's actually come from China. While OpenAI is looking to spend, I think, roughly around $1 billion to train their model,
Wow.
this one Chinese model supposedly has done it with about $7 million. So that is almost, 500x different in cost, something like that in between there where we're at. And like, when you don't have constraints, when you don't have money, when you don't have whatever, you can do a lot as long as the vision is there, as long as the incentives are in line and all of those other things. So
Yeah.
look, I think it's important for every organization to define their own innovation process. What does it mean for them? What do they need as a company? And there's no reason why that can't sit on the same level or right next to cost cutting. You can walk and chew gum at the same time. It is okay. You can always innovate, and for 99% of companies, you should always be innovating.
Mm. Now, Phil, at TaskUs, you folks work with a variety of organizations across different industries. Can you share one success story where redefining value creation led to some significant and positive outcomes? What did they
Uh,
do, and what were the results?
yeah, absolutely. And we work with a bunch of leading companies across social media, dating, gaming, healthcare, financial services, autonomous vehicles, some of the leading generative AI companies in the world. We get to work with the coolest and smartest companies out there. So my day job is really interesting. I want to share one thing that we've seen, zooming in on the autonomous vehicle industry. you know, 3 or 4 years ago, we would have had folks in TaskUs supporting autonomous vehicle company, doing, basic customer care, or even sort of AI data labeling, like computer vision type work, where you're looking at LiDAR images and camera images, and you're drawing bounding boxes around trees and around stop signs in order to teach that machine learning model how to drive the car, right? So that was kind of the primary work, as well as the other work of like helping people get their accounts set up, or hey, I forgot my password, or some other kind of like, rudimentary type account-based issues. Mike had said something earlier, right? Like 40, 50, 60% of all these jobs are transforming over time. Those same people, like now, instead of doing that work, because that work is largely being automated away, and that's fine because it always will and always has. But now they're doing like work that is so much more complex and interesting. So, for example, those same folks that would have been doing bounding boxes, maybe 2 or 3 years ago, are now, in the case where an autonomous vehicle somehow gets stuck, or somehow can't continue. Maybe the analogy I use is like your Roomba, right? Sometimes you get stuck in a corner and you have to kind of help it out, right? That happens with autonomous vehicles. Thankfully, not as often, but it does happen. When that happens, and you go on the app and say, "Hey, I need help," you'll speak to someone at Taskus who will actually not only help you, they will remotely pilot the vehicle into a safe space, right? So how cool is that for a job? You can try to explain that one to your grandparents, right? Like, oh yeah, I pilot autonomous vehicles once they, get stuck in the drive-thru at McDonald's, right? I mean, that's some pretty cool stuff. So you can probably draw your own conclusions as to whether that's value creation or not. I do think it is a, real world example of how our future of work is transforming in front of our eyes, and I'm just glad to be sort of a part of that
All
story.
right. All right, folks. Well, we have a few minutes here for some questions from our audience. And indeed, Rebecca has another comment and question. Thank you so much, Rebecca, for participating with us today. And I'll just put this out to the entire group, so just jump on in. Rebecca says she's loving the conversation so far. We love you too. And she's got another question. How can we leverage emerging technologies like AI and machine learning to not only improve efficiency, but also drive radical innovation and create entirely new business models? Anyone have some thoughts for Rebecca?
Sure. Yeah, no, it's a great question, Rebecca. What I would say is take it one step at a time. Like in creating it, AI tools are good. They're not, as people in the AI world say, artificial general intelligence. Yeah, they're not to the point where they're going to be running organizations or anything like that, but they're amazing brainstorm partners. They're amazing to just even get you to think of, like, if you asked it, hey, this is my business, here's a bunch of documents, here's a bunch of information, where could we go with this business? It'll start that conversation. It ain't making decisions for you, but it's a great way to start that. The one thing that I tell anybody in any organization, I think one of the biggest problems and the biggest holdbacks often is that organizations are not set up for this, meaning they don't have the infrastructure, the licenses, or whatever to potentially use these things inside. Let this bubble up from the ground up. Like, get a ChatGPT or Anthropic's Claude or whatever corporate license. Spend the $20 per month per employee. Give your employees a way to share about it. If you have an all hands meeting, have them just talk about what they're doing in these tools. And you will then start to see it, like, and share this across, because this is going to be the new paradigm of working. This is no different than the internet back in 98, 99, and that time frame, or in the finance world, as I said before, is like Lotus 123 was emerging. Like, this is the same kind of thing. We don't even know what these models are capable of, but the best way to figure this out as an organization, potentially to get new innovations, potentially get new efficiencies, is just to have everyone sharing and creating an environment where it's okay to do that. Because even if you don't allow ChatGPT in your workplace, I guarantee your employees are using it. And you rather have that under your control as much as possible, allow that and really have that openly share and encourage and see that. And then you'll start to see, hey, these are different directions where we could start to take the company using these tools as our partner.
All right. All right, well, everyone, I don't know what happened to our time today. We are almost out of time, but before I let you go, we are now at the action item round of the program. I'm wondering if each of you can please provide us with one quick action item that our listeners can use to take advantage of your ideas and advice today. Yemi, do you have an action item for us today?
Yeah, sure I do, Kevin. I think for me it is start with why, as I've said. and also allocate some of the budget as much as possible towards innovation, especially right now as we're planning for 2025 financial year. Let's try and allocate some budget towards innovation and think differently about how we make a business case for those discretionary spends of
Fantastic.
technology.
That is Yemi Ulusian, Program Director and Business Transformation Strategist at the Change Hive. Yemi, thanks so much for being with us again today. Mike, how about you? Do you have an action item for us today?
Yeah, mine's very tactical. So for anybody who's watching, listening to this, it's building off my last point. If you feel you're not as familiar with these tools, what I want you to do is literally change the default on your browser from Google search to Perplexity or to ChatGPT search. You can do a quick lookup and find a way to do this and just do that for a week. Live in these tools for a week. You will see what they are actually capable of. It is pretty amazing. And in some ways, you will also find out where it really lacks. And I think once you have a better understanding of that, you will have a better sense of where this is going, because these are the tools and technologies that will disrupt your businesses and your lives more than anything else going forward.
That is Mike Tedesco, ex-Senior Director of Innovation at PayPal and one of today's leading voices in digital transformation. Thank you, Mike, for being with us today. How about you, Phil? Do you have an action item for us?
Yeah, I would say get a group of your most loyal and sometimes most critical customers together, form a customer advisory board or a client advisory board, and make them part of the input process when you're making significant changes or trying to transform or introduce a ton of automation. Make sure that your customer's voice is at the center of everything you do, and you can't go wrong.
Very good. That is Phil Tomlinson, Senior Vice President of Global Offerings at TaskUs. Phil, Yemi, and Mike, it has been great speaking with you today. Thank you so much. Your perspectives and advice are so spot on. Thank you so much. And I hope that we'll get a chance to talk again soon. And to everyone joining us today, thank you too. And join us for our sister shows, AI Talk and MarTech Talk. Look, you can find out more at business-reporter.co.uk. And in the meantime, if you'd like to find me, well, you can do so. I'm on LinkedIn and I'm happy to connect there. So check me out. I'm Kevin Crane. And you can also check out my weekly audio podcast, the Digital Transformation Podcast. But for now, that'll do it for this episode of Digital Transformation Talk. And until next time, I am Kevin Crane. Thanks for watching.